In this video, we're going to be talking about making a mage build in Elden Ring at the start of the game, how to get started as a mage, and what are the things you should do at the beginning in order to get off on the right foot. I like to begin the game in Elden Ring as an astrologer when I'm trying to play as a mage. I feel like this gives you the best toolkit. You start with a staff, you start with Glintstone Arc and Glintstone Pebble, two spells that will hold you in good stead throughout the whole course of the game, and really gives you what you need to play as a mage right out the gate. By comparison, Prisoner just doesn't have the same spell set, so it'll be a little bit longer before you can get to the same place in terms of casting, although it has other advantages in other ways. But if you're just trying to play as a primary mage, I feel like Astrologer is the way to go. As far as keepsakes go, I always recommend the Golden Seed to new players. It gives you an extra flask, which can be a huge advantage, particularly when you're being a mage, because you can put that into, an FP flask, allowing you to get more spells off. It's not super important what you pick, but again, if you're a new player, Golden Seed is the way to go. Now, when talking about a mage, playing a mage in Elden Ring is not that difficult compared to other Souls games, in my opinion, mostly because you're able to maintain your resources so you can play primarily as a spellcaster without ever needing to melee in a lot of cases. Now, in order to accomplish that, you're going to have to set your flasks in a way that's mostly mana-based, meaning you're going to need the blue flasks far more than the health ones. The strategy is obviously not to get hit, so you shouldn't need to heal very often because you're trying to stay out of harm's way. So you're going to skew your flasks, 90% to the mana side and like 10% to the health side when possible, except in certain scenarios. But that's basically how you want to play, so that you always have enough to kill the enemies with spells. One really great thing in Elden Ring 2 is that when you kill difficult enemies or groups of enemies, you replenish a certain amount of flasks, and there are also like scarabs around the landscape that you can kill that replenish flasks. So this gives you even more ways to get that resource back without resting, so that you always have enough FP in order to cast your spells. Diving into the attributes of a mage, primarily you're going to want intelligence. This is what's going to increase your damage with your spells, and also any weapon that you use an Ash of War on that has like a magic type Ash of War that makes it have scaling off the intelligence stat. So you're going to want to focus pretty heavily on intelligence. Keep in mind that spellcasting also consumes stamina when you cast, so it may not be a bad idea to have some endurance as well. In my experience, you don't need to go crazy with endurance. You can still do just fine with low endurance, but you probably want to like at least 15 or so, maybe 20. And the reason for that is because you want to be able to cast spells, and then you want to be able to dodge out of the way afterward. If you exhaust all your stamina casting and then don't have any stamina to dodge, if an enemy is aggressive, you could be in a really tight spot. But you don't want to spend a lot of points in endurance early on, because you need to boost your damage rapidly in order to keep pace with the enemies. Beyond intelligence, the other two attributes you should probably have some points in are vigor, in order to take a hit or two. You don't want to go crazy again here, because again, your strategy is to not get hit, but putting a few points here will help you, survive a potential one-shot. All you need to do is survive the one-shot attacks. As long as you have enough health to survive one-shots, you have enough health. And then the other attribute is mind. Mind will allow you to cast more spells before needing to chug pots. It makes your pots go further, because every time you use one, if you use it at the end of, let's say you exhaust your whole FP bar, then you're actually gaining more back with those pots. So you definitely want to spend points in mind as well, but you want to lean heavily into intelligence and then have some points in endurance, vigor, and mind. There's no attunement attribute like there are in the Souls games, if you're familiar with those, that allow you to slot more spells. Instead, your memory slots will increase as you find items throughout the game. So I try not to worry about memory slots and how to increase them. They will increase naturally as you progress the game. Moving on to early mage equipment, probably the biggest thing is getting yourself a better staff early on. Now, there is one that you can get called the Demigod Staff or something like this that's in the Weeping Peninsula. There's a, field boss there, mini boss. I don't even think it has a health bar that you can kill pretty quickly in that area that will drop you a staff that has much better scaling than the one you begin the game with. Or you can find the Meteorite Staff, which is in a runes over in Caelid. You can check the exact location on the wiki. It's called Meteorite Staff. That has S scaling, but you can't upgrade it. So it's a really good early game staff that has fantastic scaling in terms of the damage that you deal, but not being able to upgrade it, it's going to be outpaced by other staves throughout the course of the game. But if you're just talking about the very beginning of the game, you might want to ride over there. You literally don't have to kill anything. You go right into the runes, open the chest, get it. You have an S scaling staff right out the gate. It's fantastic. Besides the staves, you're going to want to get more spells. Obviously, you're a mage. There is a sorcerer trainer not very far into the game in Limgrave in the Waypoint Ruins. Same place that it was located in the network test, if you're familiar with that. Sorceress Selene is going to sell you stuff if you defeat the boss in front of her. There's actually a scroll you can get that's just a little bit south of there also that you can give to her that will increase the spells that she sells. Some very good spells there, so make sure you pick those up if you need more spells. Speaking about the spells themselves, Glintstone Pebble is a spell that you're going to use throughout the course of the game. It's a staple. It's basically like Soul Arrow from the Souls games. It has very low cost. It deals decent damage for the cost. It has exceptional range. It tracks the target. One of the things that you're going to find out throughout the course of the game is that a lot of spells, while their damage is incredibly high, have very long cast times, or they cost way too much FP for the damage they deal. So you can actually deal the same amount or more damage with a different spell as long as you cast it a couple of times. And because Glintstone Pebble, for instance, can be cast quite quickly in rapid succession, it sometimes outperforms some of the strongest spells in the game. But that brings up another point, which is make sure that you hold down some spells. A lot of spells have like bonus effects if you hold the button down, or they're meant to be channeled by holding the R1 button down. So make sure you do that for a lot of spells as well. I also want to make a mention here for the sort of arch-type spells, the ones that put the daggers above your head. There's a couple variations of these. They are not very mana efficient. The damage they deal is substantial in a lot of cases, but they're not very mana efficient. What I would suggest doing, if you like that spell, because it's a very good spell against aggressive enemies, particularly aggressive bosses, is get the Ashes of War Glintstone Arch, put that on your melee weapon, like a cheap melee weapon or whatever. And when you are fighting an aggressive boss, instead of using the spell, use the Ash of War. It is tremendously effective. The damage is about the same as the spell, as long as you're upgrading the sword. And the cost is a fraction. Like, we're talking like a quarter of that of the spell. So you'll outperform the actual spell itself with that Ash of War. So make sure you have that Ash of War if you like that spell and use that instead. Those are the mage items you need early on to get off to a good start. There are a lot more good mage items found in Raya Lucaria Academy, but that's not something you're going to do right out of the gate. So these are the things that are going to get you started on the right path as a mage. Just a couple final tips. Remember that casting costs stamina, even when on horseback. So if you're on horseback and you're flinging away your spells and then you get in a situation where you need to boost Torrent to get out of a melee attack, if you have no stamina, that's not going to happen. So make sure you pay attention to your stamina, particularly when you're on horseback using magic, so that you can boost the hell out of there if you get in a bad spot. Another point is that dexterity reduces cast speed. I don't know what the percentages are on this. I don't know how much reduction you get per point spend. I haven't done a lot of testing because early on in the game you want to pump intelligence in order to increase your damage. You're not so worried about cast time, but how much actual damage your spells are dealing. But if you are playing further and further into the game as the mage, you may want to look into adding some points into dexterity in order to increase your cast times and make some of these harder hitting spells more viable, ones that take a little bit longer to cast. And lastly, I do recommend at some point getting a 100% physical block shield that meets your requirements. You can look on the wiki for locations for these. It's good to have in a pinch. Sometimes an enemy gets too close and you just can't dodge out of the way in time, and it's better to absorb that blow into a shield even if it drains most of your stamina than to take a big hit. So make sure you find one of these shields and keep it just in case you need it for certain scenarios. That's it for our beginner mage build. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Are you going to be playing a mage at the start of the game? What build are you going to be playing? Let us know in the comments below.